Welcome to All Grown Up Now, Tales of a Checkered Past. I'm Kenneth D. King, podcasting from my studio near Union Square in New York City. This podcast is an evolution of the tale, All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts. This is Season 2, and it's called Tales of a Checkered Past. It's a collection of short stories from my salad days on up to the present. In each podcast, another self-contained story will be presented. These podcasts will be broadcast bi-weekly, so you get 2 a month. Enjoy. Episode 41 is a little story called My Number's Not Up Yet. The time was around 1971, and the place was Oklahoma City. I was about 13 years old when this occurred. "Why do you need blueprints of the house?" Mom asked. "In case there is a mysterious fire, we can identify the charred remains," he said. "Oh." This conversation occurred while we were all sitting in the family room with some visitors one evening when I was a teenager in Oklahoma City. The visitors were 2 men from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. The reason for their visit was that they had information that there was a contract out on our family. Now, they didn't say who actually told them, and they didn't say who they believed was behind it, but we all got the picture. Miss Ann's ex-husband, Don White, had ordered it. They advised us to travel in pairs at least, vary our routines and routes home, and be aware of being followed. If we were followed, they told us to go directly to a police station without getting killed in the process. Before they left, they took blueprints to the house as well and told us that, if we rearranged rooms, they should be notified, which generated the remark about the charred remains. Indeed. Miss Ann had made a very bad marriage. Her second husband, Don, was an alcoholic and a drug addict. After throwing her through a plate glass window on their first anniversary, she divorced him. But it wasn't exactly a clean divorce. He was still hanging around, and when he wasn't, he would come and pull stupid stunts like stealing our patio furniture. That was the first time I testified in court. My age was 13. Even after the patio furniture incident, Mom and Don regularly met at his place, divorce notwithstanding. She would spend the night there and then come home and dish about his decorating. It seems he was so cheap that when he wallpapered his living room, he only papered the portions of the walls that were seen from the front door. When viewed from that angle, things looked great. But if you actually went into the living room, you saw all the patches that were bare, so he didn't have to buy that extra roll of wallpaper. He was that cheap. He liked gold wallpaper with red flocking in a very bad faux Victorian pattern. I know this wallpaper because he had wallpapered the restaurant in the hotel with it. It was the Sands Motor Hotel on Route 66 in Oklahoma City. Look it up. There's a postcard you can see on the internet. And it had a mermaid-shaped swimming pool. I'm not kidding. During this time, Don used our yard and garage to store his junk cars. One of the cars was a white Porsche 912, the engine dead. It lived in the front yard. The other junk car was a blue 1960 Austin Healey Sprite convertible. That one lived in the garage. The Porsche sat dead in the front yard. Yes, the yard, not the driveway, even though we had a 2-car driveway. It was so white trash, with the grass growing up around it and creating a bald spot underneath. He had been racing this car on the highway with the air conditioner running. The car threw a rod, and his mechanic had a hell of a time ordering a new engine from Germany. I remember having a good laugh watching the mechanic drain the oil out after the tow truck left. The sound of little nuggets of metal clinking into the drain pan sounded somewhat like kibble falling into a metal dog bowl. So satisfying. So as I said, this car sat in the front yard for a year and a half after the divorce. Miss Ann would bitch and bitch to us about it, but never to him, and she would never do anything about it except have us mow around it. So one day I put a for sale sign on it. Seemed like a good idea to me. Don had an absolute conniption fit about the for sale sign. Damn, he was mad. But you know what? It got the car moved. Speaking of moving cars, the other car, the Austin Healey Sprite that lived in the garage, was his second car to economize on gas. Now understand, this was before the gas crisis. He bought this car because he didn't like Miss Ann driving the aquamarine blue Pontiac tuna boat that my dad had given her. He actually thought she would drive this tin can of a car on a regular basis. Well, she didn't. He finally had to bribe her with the new Thunderbird to get rid of the Pontiac. True to its traditional British heritage, the Sprite had the traditional British electrical system with all of its gremlins, and it required a 24-hour notice on the battery charger before it could be driven. But it was a fun ride once it was going. Now, Mother's Day, we got this idea to drive the car over to the florist to get Mom a bouquet of flowers. Now, mind you, none of us were of driving age, but I'd watched Mom drive, and I just knew I could do it. Besides, Don once had let me drive it on a country road, so I fired it up, backed it out of the driveway, put it in gear, and then it wouldn't go.
Uh-oh.
When I said down the driveway, down was the operative word. We had a very steep driveway, which was really treacherous in winter. Miss Ann would have to take a running start and hope like hell that she didn't slip on the ice and crash into the side of the garage before she got in. But back to that Saturday morning. I backed the Austin down the driveway, put it in first gear, and let out the clutch. And nothing. I put it in reverse, nothing. That goddamn car would not move. And I just thought, fuck. Now we were in a jam. We had to get the car back up the damn driveway without benefit of its own power before Miss Ann returned. All the neighbor kids helped. Even though it was such a tiny little car, it took us about an hour, but we did it. So, Mom came home from the bank and wanted to take the Austin to the nursery to get some plants. Would I want to come along? Yikes. We got in, she fired it up, put it in gear, and nothing. It just sat there. What could possibly be wrong with this car? She couldn't figure out why the car wasn't moving. She called over Mr. Knapp, our neighbor and husband to the nosy lard-ass Mrs. Knapp, who was a mechanic. He diagnosed the problem. A broken axle. A broken axle. How random. And I didn't even have a good time driving it before it broke. Oh, goddamn, Mom was mad when she found out. And then she heard from Mrs. Knapp, who no doubt had permanent marks on her nose where the binocular sat spying on the neighbors, that all the neighbor kids were pushing the car up the driveway. Miss Ann deduced how it got down the drive, and I think I'm still grounded for that one. While I was grounded for breaking the car, I was reading Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. It was one of the many books housed in our bookshelves. One positive thing both my parents instilled in me was the love of reading. I remember both of them propped up in bed each night, their reading lights and reading glasses on. To this day, I can't get to sleep unless I have at least a paragraph, and I'll read anything that comes to hand, even the toothpaste tube. The only exceptions are textbooks on economics and Proust. As there were always books around, I would just choose one to read, not knowing anything about the subject or the author. This was one of my escapes during my childhood and adolescence. One book I especially remember was a book on entertaining written by famous party giver of the 30s, Elsa Maxwell. Why would Miss Ann have that book in Salina, Kansas? Now, Elsa was quite a raconteur, and I do admire her ability with the turn of phrase. The passage I remember most out of this book concerns exotic foods, such as chocolate-covered grasshoppers. Elsa states most emphatically that such foods must not only be avoided, they should be flung forcibly from sight. I so love that image. This particular night, though, after falling fast asleep in the middle of the night, I found myself wide awake for apparently no reason. So I was lying there and wondering just why I was awake. And then I heard it. There was this tiny scratching sound coming from the front door. My headboard was on the wall shared by the entry hall, so I could hear any sound coming from there. Also, there were very large windows over my bed that opened up onto the front porch right next to the front door. I heard it again. Right then, the images from In Cold Blood started running through my mind. I could imagine a flashlight shining into my eyes, and then bang! I could imagine someone shooting in the window and killing me. Near panic, I quietly crawled down onto the floor and crawled into the hallway like I saw army guys in the movies do to avoid gunfire. Then I heard it again. I crept to the front door right about the time Miss Ann came down the stairs. She had heard it too, as she slept with one eye and one ear open. She had her hair up in the satin scarf, her quilted satin robe on. We watched the doorknob jiggling. It was like film noir. "What do we do?" I whispered as Kathy came around the corner. "Kathy, call the police," Miss Ann hissed. Then, as I was looking through the peephole, a really stupid place to be, she turned on the porch light. I saw a guy with a motorcycle helmet on, with one of those smoky gray visors so you couldn't see his face. And this was at night. There was a motorcycle idling at the curb. When the light went on, it startled him. He ran, jumped onto the bike, and sped off. Not 30 seconds later, there were 7 police cars in front of the house. "Why so many cars, officer?" Mom asked. "Your name and address is posted on the dispatch switchboard. We have orders from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation that if we get a call from this address, we need to get there immediately." I saw 2 other officers talking to each other, and I overheard one say, "It looks like their number wasn't up yet." A few years later, before college, I was having a conversation with Miss Ann's lawyer, Harry, who, as I've said before, was the voice of reason during my adolescence. The topic of Don White and the hitman came up. I remember exactly what he said to me. He said, "I told him, you got a hitman? We got a hitman. If anything happens to them, you'll find your ass in a ditch in western Oklahoma with your throat cut." That's how they handled things in Oklahoma in the 70s. And that is how I live to tell this tale. Thanks for listening. You can get the audiobook All Grown Up Now on iTunes, Audible, and Amazon, or from my website, allgrownupnow.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you have any questions, you can reach me through the website, allgrownupnow.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Kenneth D. King, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, kennethdking.com.